They lied to you. They told you life peaks in your 20s, that by 30 you should have it all figured out. The job, the house, the family, the smile on your face that convinces everyone you're doing great. But deep down, something still, feels, off. You've followed the script, so why does it feel like you're living someone else's story? Carl Jung had a radically different view on adulthood, and it might be the truth you've been waiting your whole life to hear. According to him, your real life doesn't begin until you find yourself not the version you perform for the world, but the one you've buried beneath expectations. And here's the kicker. That awakening usually starts the moment society says you're past your prime. What if your so-called midlife crisis isn't a crisis at all, but a second birth? In this video, you're not just going to rethink your timeline, you're going to reclaim it. You'll discover why your confusion is actually a sign of wisdom, how the discomfort you're feeling is the doorway to authenticity, and why the best, freest, most honest years of your life might be about to begin. But first, we need to talk about everything you thought you knew about growing up. Carl Jung had a view that, for many people, feels like a slap in the face of modern society. While the world insists that life peaks before 40, he believed the opposite. Real life actually begins after that. He saw the first 40 years as a rehearsal, a warm-up, a rough draft before the final sketch, and when you really think about it, it makes perfect sense. After all, how many people in their 20s or 30s truly know who they are? Jung's view on adulthood is almost an invitation to rebellion, but the kind that sets you free. He saw this stage not as the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. And here's the thing, while most people fear midlife, he saw it as a gateway to self-knowledge. It's as if he were saying, now that you've lived the script others wrote for you, why not write your own? This flipped perspective can completely change how we see time and our choices. Imagine how many people hit 40 feeling like they're behind, when in reality, they're just getting started. Jung would call this moment an awakening, a turning point when social masks start to feel heavy and the longing for authenticity starts to roar. That shift, far from being a decline, could be the start of true freedom. But before we get there, we need to talk about what so many call a crisis, and how maybe it's not as terrifying as it seems. Most people hear midlife crisis and immediately think of chaos, sports cars, reckless decisions, or sudden career changes. But from Carl Jung's perspective, this so-called crisis might actually be a breakthrough. What if it's not about losing your way, but finally questioning the path you've been blindly following? What if, instead of falling apart, you're just beginning to come together? That shift changes everything. The cultural narrative tells us we're supposed to panic at 40, like there's some invisible clock ticking, reminding us of everything we didn't achieve. But Jung's view on adulthood invites a powerful reframe. Maybe this isn't a meltdown, maybe it's a wake-up call, a natural and necessary dismantling of a life built on other people's expectations. It's the moment you realize that what got you here won't get you any further. And that's not failure, that's evolution. Think of it like renovating a house. You don't call it a crisis when you knock down a wall to make space for something better, you call it a transformation. That's what this midlife turning point can be, the start of building a life that finally fits, not the one you inherited, but the one you consciously design. And to design it, first you have to understand everything that shaped who you are today. The first 4 decades of life often feel like a race, chasing validation, collecting titles, proving worth. Most people spend their 20s and 30s building what they think is identity, but it's usually a patchwork of social masks and external expectations. Carl Jung believed this phase is necessary. It's the testing ground. You're gathering experiences, trying roles, and absorbing values that may not even be yours. But all of this, unknowingly, becomes your emotional scaffolding. We take on jobs that look impressive on paper, not because they light us up, but because they impress others. We shape relationships, buy things, pursue goals, all through the lens of what should make us happy. It's like following a GPS someone else programmed, without ever asking if that destination is even yours. This is where Jung's view on adulthood becomes so relevant. He saw this era not as wasted, but as preparation. You're collecting data about who you're not, to someday find out who you are. And here's the thing, no one tells you this is normal. You might look around and think everyone else has it figured out. Spoiler, they don't. Most are stuck performing roles they never chose. locked in jobs they can't stand, and wearing smiles that don't match how they feel inside. This identity-building phase is messy, but is part of the process. Just like a draft isn't the final book, your early life isn't the full story. If you're in your 30s and still feel lost, good. That means you're alive, questioning, and not sleepwalking through life. Don't rush to fix your confusion. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Start journaling. Talk to people outside your bubble. Read books like The Road to Character by David Brooks or Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. These tools don't give you answers, but they sharpen your inner compass. Eventually, the noise gets quieter. The approval you once craved doesn't feel so urgent. And that's when something interesting happens. A shift begins. Not a loud one, but subtle, internal. A kind of restlessness you can't ignore. And that's when you begin to feel the pull toward something deeper, something far more personal. A calling that whispers louder as you get closer to the next phase. Somewhere around 40, something starts to stir. A quiet, persistent feeling that the old way is no longer fit. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the journey to becoming whole, to peeling back layers until you finally meet yourself. It's not dramatic at first. It often begins with boredom in places that used to thrill you, or discomfort in conversations you once enjoyed. That's not burnout, that's evolution knocking on your door. Individuation isn't about rejecting everything you've built, it's about asking if what you've built truly reflects who you are. It's like waking up in a house you designed 20 years ago and wondering, did I really choose this wallpaper? That moment of pause is sacred. It means you're no longer living on autopilot, and the desire for authenticity is starting to overpower. The desire for approval, that's the beginning of something powerful. This is the stage where freedom starts to feel more important than fitting in. You begin to ask questions you avoided for years. What do I really want? Whose voice have I been following? And you realize your priorities are shifting. The success you once craved might feel hollow now. That's not failure. It's a signal, a redirection toward something more meaningful, a life that feels aligned, not just impressive. Practically speaking, this is a great time to reconnect with parts of yourself that got buried. Maybe it's picking up an old hobby, or starting therapy to unpack long-held beliefs. Even small actions like taking quiet walks without your phone can create space for reflection. Books like Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer or Falling Upward by Richard Rohr can be guiding lights during this phase. This awakening isn't always comfortable, but it's deeply necessary. It's the soul's way of saying, you're ready for more. And once you hear that inner voice, it becomes harder to ignore. The next chapter isn't about adding more to your life, it's about letting go of what no longer serves you. But that process brings with it another layer of discomfort, one that often starts with a nagging question that won't go away. It doesn't usually happen all at once. At first, it's just a quiet thought in the back of your mind. Is this really it? That question might show up during your commute, in the middle of a meeting, or while scrolling through social media late at night. Carl Jung understood this as part of the soul's natural evolution. These existential nudges are signals, not symptoms, signs that your inner self is ready for deeper questions, and those questions don't go away. In fact, they multiply. Why do I feel like a stranger in my own life? What would happen if I stopped pretending? The discomfort grows not because something's wrong, but because something's waking up. Jung's view on adulthood helps normalize this stage. It's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough trying to happen. If only you'll stop pushing it away. This discomfort can be disorienting. You may feel guilty for wanting something different, especially if life looks successful from the outside. But that guilt is just the residue of old programming, the part of you still trying to please everyone else. Let it go. It's okay to outgrow a life you once wanted. In fact, that's exactly what growth looks like. The questions are there, to pull you inward, not tear you apart. So what can you do when this discomfort shows up? First, stop numbing it. Put the phone down, pause the binge watching, cancel the noise. Give your thoughts room to breathe. Start writing them out, not to get answers, but to see what patterns appear. One day, a recurring word or theme might show up. That's your clue. Follow it gently. And remember, this discomfort is not your enemy, it's your compass. As you begin to sit with these deeper reflections, another realization starts to take shape. You begin to sense that the version of you the world sees, the social mask, might not be the full story. And once you notice that split between who you show and who you are, well, there's no unseeing it. That awareness sets the stage for the next phase, where masks fall and the real work begins. From the moment we're born, we start performing, smiling when we're praised, hiding parts of ourselves to fit in little by little. We build what Jung called the persona. It's the mask we wear to survive the world, to belong, to be accepted. But as the years pass, many start to realize the mask has grown too tight, and behind it, a self that's been waiting, patiently, to be seen. Carl Jung believed that adulthood, especially the midlife stage, is when the cracks in the persona begin to show. You start saying yes out of habit, not desire. You laugh at jokes that don't land, stay in roles that don't fit, and slowly wonder, who am I without all this? The process of individuation begins when you stop trying to be what the world wants and start reclaiming what's been buried. This shedding of the persona doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, brave unraveling. You begin to notice the difference between your public face and your inner truth, and the gap feels unbearable. That's the moment when discomfort becomes opportunity, not to burn everything down, but to rebuild, consciously, courageously, piece by piece. Here's something practical. Try tracking your auto-responses. When you say I'm fine, when you nod along, ask yourself, is this real, or just a performance? Journaling these moments creates awareness. Another powerful exercise is to list things you do solely for appearance, then ask which ones you'd keep if no one was watching. This process begins the dismantling. It's uncomfortable and freeing. As you peel off those layers, something else comes into view. Beneath the social masks, beyond the expectations, there's a version of you that doesn't seek applause, just alignment. And once that version starts emerging, everything shifts. The applause becomes quieter. The need for external validation fades, and your priorities, those begin to change in ways you never expected. At some point, chasing titles, promotions, and praise starts to feel like eating cotton candy, sweet but empty. Carl Jung believed that around midlife, our energy shifts direction. We stop building outward and start digging inward. What once felt urgent, status, approval, more, loses its grip. And in that space, new desires begin to emerge, depth, meaning, and inner peace. This change of priorities isn't sudden. It creeps in subtly, like a change in weather. You might find yourself uninterested in office politics, tired of small talk, craving solitude instead of spotlight. These aren't signs of depression, they're signs of awakening. Jung saw this phase as a return to the self, a moment where authenticity starts to matter more than appearance. You're not withdrawing, you're finally listening. You may begin to feel drawn to things you once ignored. Meditation, journaling, long walks without a goal, activities that invite stillness rather than stimulation. That's no accident. The mind is craving alignment. The soul, tired of performing, wants rest and truth. And once you taste that internal freedom, no amount of applause can substitute it. If you're feeling this shift, don't panic. Lean into it. Try reading The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer or Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. These aren't just self-help books, they're invitations to return to yourself and notice what lights you up from the inside, even if it looks boring to others. That's the new compass. Follow it. This is also a season of pruning, letting go of relationships, habits, and routines that no longer nourish you. It might feel like loss at first, but it's really clarity. You're making room for a life built on values, not vanity. And as you realign, something beautiful happens. Your decisions begin to reflect your soul, not your social conditioning. And that's when you start noticing a deeper kind of balance, not just in your schedule, but in your emotional responses. You're not reacting like you used to. You're observing more, feeling differently. And this brings us to something fascinating that even neuroscience is beginning to confirm. As we age, something quietly powerful begins to shift, and it's not just in the body, it's in the brain. Carl Jung always believed that midlife wasn't a decline but a deepening, and modern neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that, as we get older, the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, becomes less reactive. Translation: we're less likely to get hijacked by every emotion that passes through us. This is emotional maturity in action. You stop being triggered by every little thing. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You shrug instead of rage. A rude comment doesn't send you spiraling. It barely leaves a scratch. It's not about becoming passive. It's about choosing your responses rather than being ruled by them. That's real power. And it's one of the quiet superpowers of aging. With more balanced brain chemistry, we become more reflective. We think before we speak. We weigh the long term. And this shift helps us live more intentionally, not just reacting to life, but responding with clarity. Carl Jung would call this a sign of individuation, the emotional and mental alignment between who you are inside and how you show up in the world. Want to strengthen this? Mindfulness practices help a lot. Apps like Headspace or Calm can be useful, but even 5 minutes of daily breathing can retrain your nervous system. Neuroscientist Dr. Daniel Siegel talks about name it to tame it. Just labeling your emotions activates the prefrontal cortex and calms the limbic system. In simple terms, awareness rewires your brain. And this isn't about perfection. You'll still get annoyed. You'll still feel sadness, anger, fear. But the difference is, you won't drown in them. Emotional maturity doesn't mean escaping your emotions. It means allowing them, feeling them fully, and then choosing what to do next. And with that choice comes something precious, peace. This internal balance prepares you for something even deeper, because once your emotions stop running the show, you're finally ready to let go of the old versions of yourself. And that's when the real transformation begins, the dismantling and rebuilding of the self. To Carl Jung, what we call a midlife crisis is really something far more sacred, a dismantling. It's not about falling apart, it's about shedding everything that isn't you. Like an old skin peeling away. It's messy, yes, but necessary. This is the stage where you stop pretending and start confronting, not the world, but yourself. You begin to ask, what have I built that doesn't belong to me? Careers chosen to impress, relationships maintained out of fear, beliefs absorbed without questioning. It all starts to crack. And here's the paradox. That cracking is the very thing that sets you free. Jung saw this not as collapse, but as liberation, the old self, making space for something more real. Rebuilding the self isn't about replacing the mask with another one. It's about creating a foundation that holds your truth, not your performance. This process requires honesty, humility, and courage. Sometimes it means walking away from things and people who no longer fit. Sometimes it means standing still in the silence until the next version of you begins to take shape. Here's something real you can do. Write a letter to your former self. Thank them for surviving, for adapting, for trying. Then write a letter to your future self, not the ideal version, but the true one, the one you're building now. Let that version guide your next steps. This is how you begin the reconstruction, not by rushing, but by honoring what matters most. And don't be surprised if it feels lonely at times. Transformation often requires solitude, but in that solitude, you'll begin to feel something else rising: clarity, strength, and alignment. You're not who you were, and you're not yet who you'll be. You're in the sacred middle, the forge where authenticity is born. And what comes after the fire? What's on the other side of the breakdown? The questions, the silent nights. That's where the reward begins to unfold. The unexpected gift of this whole journey. A life rooted in freedom, grounded in authenticity. And finally, yours. There's a quiet kind of joy that comes when you stop chasing and start being. Carl Jung believed that the second half of life offers something the first never could. Authenticity. Not the curated image, not the polished version, the real you. After all the dismantling, questioning, and letting go, you begin to feel a lightness that's hard to describe. That lightness, it's freedom. People often think freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But Jung's view on adulthood suggests something deeper. Freedom is living in alignment with your inner truth. It's saying no without guilt, yes without fear, and walking through the world without needing to wear a mask. That's the kind of freedom that doesn't fade, because it comes from within. Studies have shown that people in midlife often report higher levels of satisfaction, not because life gets easier, but because they finally stop lying to themselves. They stop playing roles, stop chasing approval, and start focusing on what really matters. Relationships become more honest, work becomes more meaningful, or, in some cases, they finally walk away from what no longer serves them. You might find yourself waking up with more clarity. You don't need to impress anyone anymore. You just want to feel connected to yourself, to others, to something deeper. That's the hidden reward of the midlife passage, not riches or applause, but peace, a kind of inner silence that says, I know who I am now. and I like this person. And yes, this doesn't mean the journey ends. It just means you're no longer running from yourself. Instead, you're walking beside yourself as a partner, not an enemy. You've seen your shadows, owned your stories, and integrated the parts you once tried to hide. This wholeness doesn't make you perfect, it makes you powerful. And as you step into this new phase with courage and clarity, one truth becomes beautifully clear. Life doesn't end at midlife, it begins there. So the real question is, now that you've found yourself, what will you create with the rest of your life? So now that you know life doesn't end at 40, it begins. What are you going to do with that truth? Are you going to keep performing for a world that never really knew you? Or are you finally ready to take off the mask and meet the person beneath it, the one who's been whispering, waiting, longing to be seen? Because the moment you choose authenticity over approval, everything changes. You don't need permission to change your story. You just need courage. And if you've made it this far, you already have it. So ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? What have I been afraid to feel? What would my life look like if it were truly mine? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, what resonated with you the most? What part of your life feels ready to be rewritten? Drop it below, because you're not alone in this. And if this video stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. We're just getting started.